Hey guys, so you've requested it a few times and I'm finally doing it. Today we are talking about my favorite fiction books of all time that I can remember right now, because maybe I forgot one or two. We're just gonna dive in. I have 20 books that I have thought about and listed, and hopefully I didn't forget anything like major. So let's just, they're pretty much gonna be in no particular order, except this first one, my favorite fiction book of all time. My daughter actually asked me this question the other day at supper, and my husband was surprised by my answer because I don't really talk about this book very much because I read it and like there's nothing new coming out. That book is Sherlock Holmes. The short stories. So The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, the memoirs, and The Return of Sherlock Holmes. These are my favorite books, stories. Yeah, I love Sherlock, and I don't know much more to say because I'm just sad that there will be no more like this. Yeah, it's a sad day. But we gotta move on and we gotta talk about my other books or we're gonna be here forever. But if you have Sherlock-esque recommendations, please leave them in the comments below because I miss Sherlock. Okay, then my books are just kind of like spilt across here. We'll go through these, and then I have a few that I don't own that I have listed. So yeah, the next one is The Mark of the Raven. So this is a Christian fantasy series. It's a trilogy, and yeah, my favorite is definitely the first book. We follow a girl named Celine who is needs to take over the family business, which apparently is assassinations, and she didn't realize that, and she's not so keen on it. And yeah, I don't want to spoil this book. I just really enjoyed it. I feel like the second book is not so great. Third book is better than the second, but like first book is best. But I still think it's a really good trilogy overall, and I would recommend it. I'm gonna recommend all these books. I always say this. Okay, the next one beside me is Frank Peretti's The Oath. I reread this one in the fall and enjoyed it just as much as I did in high school. This is like supernatural suspense about a town that has a visit by a flying dragon. Wait, dragons fly. I was thinking flying dinosaur. Flying dragon. A dragon that eats people. That sounds kind of weird. It is kind of weird, but like also really well done. Of course, I had to include my favorite Agatha Christie book. That is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. I can't really say much specifically about this book. I've only read it once. I do want to reread it because Agatha Christie leaves breadcrumbs in her books, you know, clues along the way that you should pick up on, but I never do. I really enjoyed this one. This is like, yeah, my favorite of hers. And I like that she always kind of, at the end of her books, you know, brings in like 5-ish characters and explains why it could have been either one or like any one of them. And then she like lays out the answer and it's like, it's never the person I figured it was. Actually, often I like don't even know who I would think it was. But yeah, this one's my favorite of hers. And I mean, I can't do this list without including a Jamie Jo Wright. So far, this one is still my favorite, The Curse of Misty Wayfair. I am in the middle of reading her new one though, so maybe that one will take over. But these are like dual timeline, so usually like early 1900s and present day. This one has a ghost in it. I don't know. I kind of like going into these blind, but the old-timey person is a post-mortem photographer, which is, yeah, someone that takes pictures of people when they're dead, but not always like, you know, in the coffin dead, but sometimes like propped up dead, because this was a thing back in the day. You like pose with your loved ones like you are, like they were still alive. Yeah, and then there's also like elements of a mental asylum, and then present day there's like legalism and forgiveness, and there's all sorts of things going on, and this is definitely my favorite of her books. Next up, I think most of you know this one's going to be on the list. This is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. Book 3 is coming out this year and I'm excited. This is a YA sci-fi series, which I haven't read a ton of sci-fi, so maybe I just don't think this is my kind of genre book, but I really like this one. So maybe give me some like sci-fi recommendations if there's anything good. So in this book we follow our main character. Her name is Spencer. She goes by Spin, and her father was labeled a coward. He was a pilot on their planet, and he turned traitor. And so she's trying to do life. She wants to be a pilot, but she has like her father's history kind of looming over her and people don't really trust her. And I flew through this book. I thought it was starting with like Brandon Sanderson's like worst book, and so far it's still my favorite of his. Then let's go something very different. This is a free verse novel. This is Maybe. It's pretty much like Laura Ingalls, her stories, the Little House series, except free verse and a little bit more gritty and real and troubling, but like in a really good way. So our main character May struggles with dyslexia, and she goes and helps a family, I think with childcare over the winter. It's been a few years since I read this. I just got it out from the library because I want to reread it, because this was the book that made me fall in love with free verse novels. And actually the reason I got it out from the library was because I'm going to do a free verse novel recommendation video soon. This one's definitely going to be on there. Okay, there are like quite a few books on this list that I read like in the last 6 months. I feel like I'm just like really starting to hone in on the kind of books that I like. This one is Collision of Lies, and this is a Christian suspense story. Our main character is a detective, and she finds hears about this couple who thinks that, or was told that their son died in a bus crash 3 years ago, but the mom just got a text from him and the mom is like convinced he's alive. The dad is not so sure, and she's going to investigate. And this was like a wild ride. I really enjoyed this one. Why do I keep saying that? Another suspense story that I read recently that I really liked is Formula of Deception. So our main character is kind of like, she changed her name after her sister disappeared. It's not like witness protection, but kind of like witness protection. And she is pretending to have experience as a forensic artist and helping out the Alaskan police, the Kodiak, in Kodiak, Alaska. Really, she has no experience in forensic artistry. She's helping them with a case, and she kind of gets like sucked into it. I'm so terrible at describing this. So far, I have enjoyed a lot of Carrie Stewart Parks's twists in her books, and yeah, so far this one has been my favorite of hers. But I have a bunch more on my like TBR shelf, so that might not hold out for very long. Going back to another middle grade one, this is Rain Rain. So this is written by Anne M. Martin. That's a really loud vehicle. This is written by Anne M. Martin, who wrote The Babysitter's Club, but like throughout all your ideas of this book based on that is about a girl who, her name is Rose, yes, and she's obsessed with homonyms. She is like, I think has Asperger's, and her dog's name is Rain. And I don't know, it was just like a deep thought-provoking middle grade book, and I wish there was more middle grade books like this when I was younger and I wasn't just reading The Babysitter's Club. Yeah, this one was kind of like the book that made me fall in love with middle grade books as an adult. Okay, another book, series, a trilogy that I recommend a lot is If I Run by Terry Blackstock. This one is a suspense story, and really, like, if you're going to start this book, have the other two lined up and ready to go, because there is no time gap between the books and you can just like devour them all in a weekend. So our main character, Casey, yes, Casey, her DNA is all over a crime scene. Right at the beginning of the book, she walks in on like her best friend murdered, and she knows she's going to be like, it's going to be pinned on her because something sketchy is going on. Someone wants her behind bars, or dead or something. And so she kind of like goes on the run and figures out how to disguise herself and like trying to figure out who killed her best friend while being on the run. And yeah, I read this series so quickly. It was really hard. I wanted to put this author on this list, but there were 3 book options that like I just tried to choose between, but I went with The Story Girl. So this is obviously L.M. Montgomery. The other 2 options were the one after this, which is called The Golden Road, and Anne of Avonlea I also really enjoyed. But The Story Girl follows Sarah Stanley, and if you're like Canadian, I think it was only Canadian, the TV show that used to be on. Okay, of course the toddler just woke up from his nap and needed to use the washroom. The TV show Ruta Avonlea is this story. So Sarah Stanley is just this girl that has lots of stories to tell, and pretty much every chapter is just kind of like its own little story, and it's just a fun little ride, a sweet story, and it reminded me of my childhood and watching Ruta Avonlea. Okay, a book that I got a number of you to read in the last 6 months or so is The Line Between. This is a cultish book where we follow a girl named Winter who kind of gets like kicked out of her cult and goes on the run, and there's like a worldwide pandemic, or nationwide at least, and this was such a fun ride. Book 2, I don't know if it's a series or just the duology. Book 2 is a little disappointing, but I really enjoyed book 1, and this totally got me into cult books, so this definitely had to make the list. The last one that I own, but not the last one on this list, is Safely Home by Randy Alcorn. So this is the story of kind of like a persecution to Christians in China, but there's also like an American character that kind of goes over. I'm doing a terrible job at this. But this book was written in the 90s, and besides like a reference to a fax machine and the obvious absence of cell phones, it feels like this book was written now. It is so relevant, and it really made me like question how I'm living my life, and if I am really living it for Christ, or if I'm kind of like just hiding behind, I don't know, trying to be too polite and worrying about stepping on people's toes when I just need to be like honest and truthful. And oh man, really butchering this explanation, but I would highly recommend this. Oh, a book that I do own that I forgot to grab is A Little Princess. I think this is just nostalgia. I really like the 95 movie A Little Princess, where we follow a girl named Sarah Crewe who goes to a boarding school in England, and she starts out wealthy, but things happen and all her money gets taken away. She ends up being a servant, and you know, she still shows love and grace and kindness to people, and I love her character. The book was good. I got used to the 1995 movie ending, so I'm a little disappointed on the like real ending of the story, like the book. I mean, it's still good, but I kind of like the movie ending better. But yeah, if you haven't read that book, that's a classic I would highly recommend. Another like upper middle grade book is The Wednesday Wars. This is a Gary D. Schmidt book about, it's set like during the Vietnam War, and we follow a 7th grade boy named Holling Hood who ends up going to be in a Shakespeare play. He finds out he likes Shakespeare. Oh my goodness, this is a book that I can't explain at all. Gary D. Schmidt just does a really good job of weaving certain themes through his books and making you feel emotional and like laughing at the same time. If you're looking for some middle grade recommendations, so he has that book, and then the companion novel is Okay for Now. And then he had a book that came out that's a companion novel to those that came out at the beginning of this year called Just Like That. And yeah, they're all like the same general like vibe, or like, I don't know, they give me all the same kind of feels. You really like feel for the main character and get invested, and yeah, I really like all 3 of those books. A historical fiction book to add to this list is Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sapeties. So I like went on a binge and read most of her books last year, and that one was by far my favorite. So this one it follows I think 4 main characters during World War II, and they're kind of just fleeing the country that they're in. Oh my goodness, it's been a while. And just, I don't know, normally I don't like books that follow more than 1 main character, especially not more than 2, but I listened to it on audio, and the narrators were really good, so it was a different narrator for each character. And yeah, like she writes historical fiction in a way that's like hard, you know, you can feel the pain, but it's not too graphic and it's not vulgar. I feel like I can be hard with historical fiction, and I feel like she writes it so well. A YA fantasy book that I really enjoyed is Stepsister. This is kind of like a Cinderella retelling, but it kind of takes place like right after Cinderella. We follow one of the stepsisters who cut off her toes, because apparently that is how the actual book, like actual fairy tale goes. I've never even read the original Cinderella, and I still need to. So we follow one of the stepsisters, and now Cinderella is like married off and whatever. And this is, I think, kind of during the French Revolution, if I'm not mistaken. It's in France, and there's some kind of revolution going on anyway. And I don't know, like, it's interesting to get the perspective of the stepsister and like see her regret over the time after Cinderella's off and married, and kind of see some of her backstory. And obviously, like, this is just like someone else's take on it, but it was really well done, and I really enjoyed it. The best audiobook I have ever listened to is the book Echo. It is a World War II middle grade historical fiction book that follows, it kind of like, oh, it's not all World War II actually. It jumps different timelines and different people, but through it all is like this magical harmonica that makes its way to people. So like the beginning of the book kind of starts out with a bit of a fairy tale. Then we jump in with one character and they get this harmonica, and then we jump in with another character and they have their harmonica. The like fantastical element through it is really good, but also like it took me a minute to like get into. But it's really well done. And then if you get it on audio, then it has like beautiful music playing as well. If you're going to ever read that one, you have to listen to it on audio. Okay, and then I think the last book, assuming I didn't forget any of these, it's called Tainted, and it is pretty much a kind of like a twist on Frankenstein. So it's about a girl who, her father has he's a scientist and kind of like messed with her genetics a little bit, so she has these like powers that she shouldn't really have, and she feels like a bit like a monster, hence like the whole Frankenstein vibes. And her father kind of wants to experiment on her, and she needs to flee. And yeah, I don't know, it was a very interesting book. It's another one, so this one's a duology. There's Tainted and Awakened. I think I would really like to reread those, pretty much along with all the books on this list. Okay, so there it is. You made me do it. Those are my favorite books, I think. 20 of my favorite fiction books. As soon as I'm done this, I'm going to remember one that I forgot. But since you were so mean to make me pick some favorites, I want you to tell me a few of your favorite fiction books. It doesn't have to be like absolutely forever favorite, but tell me a few of them and maybe I will read some of those. Thanks for watching, guys.